his employees got worried that he didn't come into work that evening. So they went to the house, the door was unlocked, so they went in and they found him at the bottom of the stairs at the basement. They called 911, ER shows up, takes him to the hospital, and it appeared at the scenes like an elderly man fell down the stairs and hit his head.
Warning. The podcast you're about to listen to may contain graphic descriptions of violent assaults, murder, and adult language. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome to the Murder Police Podcast, The Murder of Charlie Sowers, Part 1. Welcome to the Murder Police Podcast. Today we will be discussing the 2009 murder of 71-year-old Charlie Sowers. We have with us Rob Wilson, who's been here 4 times before. Mm-hmm. Rob, how are you today?
Doing very well, thank you.
Thank you for coming back.
Anytime.
It's always a pleasure. David, how are you?
Good, I'm here. And thanks again for coming back. We were joking before we started. We should call this the Murder Police Rob Wilson Show. Since I think you've outranked everybody.
I think Rob has outranked everyone that's
this
ever been here.
This is my 5th visit. Do I get like a gold jacket or
you
something?
Do.
We should get
Got a pint glass there. We'll top it off for you with something.
I'll take anything you guys want to give me for free.
We will pass
there's
it
a
right
murder
out.
police pocket knife. Just we don't want that to show up in a crime scene, or do we? I mean, it's
some good advertisement right there.
Exactly. Just make sure it's angled so the forensic pictures get it in the sternum, wherever it's left. So. But all kidding aside, thanks for coming back. And this is a fascinating case, too.
Yeah, I always enjoy coming back and talking to you guys.
We've had you for our listeners who have maybe not listened or want to listen. We've had you on here for Alex Johnson. Very interesting case. Probably ranking up there with one of my favorites.
Mine, too.
Megan Liebengood. Todd Schumacher, which we just covered not too long ago. And then cold cases with you.
Yep.
You're just a plethora of knowledge, Rob.
Well, you stay in one place that long, so you're going to come across some cases. So, yeah, I was in homicide for almost 20 years, so certainly had my share of interesting cases.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit more about you and your career, just to refresh people.
Sure. Joined the police department, I guess, summer of 98. Went through the academy and then got assigned to West Sector, second shift, did 2-3 years there. Then the first chance I got to interview for the detective bureau I did, was lucky enough to land in the robbery homicide unit, and so fortunate to get into a unit with such top-notch people. I mean, there wasn't a better place to learn investigations in the homicide unit with that personnel.
And it was fun.
Oh, it was so much fun.
Yeah, for sure. Got to say it's fun.
Yeah.
I don't know if people would grasp it that way, but it was.
There is, a morbid side to it, but that job has to be done. But you do it long enough, and you have to do it with a sense of humor, or you will go a little crazy.
Oh, I'm sure.
And fortunately, you made it in with just that few years on, which was a sign of how things have changed, is that years ago, you went to the detective bureau based on seniority, which didn't always get a lot of work done, but that's a whole different era.
Yeah,
so.
It used to be seen upon as like almost a retirement gig.
Yes, exactly.
You could go to burglary and just ride it out, and nobody cared if you solved any cases or not. Homicide unit was a little different, and we got really lucky with people like Paul Williams, James Curlis, as the supervisors. Chris Schoonover, and then we get Matt Brotherton, Rob Wilson, Dave Richardson, Bill Brislin, Steve McCown, Franz Wolf, all these people that we didn't have any movement in that unit for over 10 years.
Which is fantastic.
Yes,
fantastic.
And that's there have been talk about just for mental well-being, you only stay in homicide or sex crimes for like 5 years, and it's like, that's when you're really just learning the job. You're becoming proficient at it. So I understand that and appreciate, people caring about our mental health and such, but you're really just kind of catching your groove at that 5-year mark and really becoming confident in what you're doing.
And I think there's worse places to work in the PD.
Oh, the
crimes against children. Amen. That one is mind-blowing, and God bless the people that can deal with that.
Yeah, of course, I've been to several autopsies. I've only been to one child autopsy. I'll never go again. That one stuck with me, and it's like, I don't need to do that.
Yeah, it's rough. Those are the ones that really go inside that box and come out on you unexpectedly.
Yeah, those people do some terrific work, and hats off to them.
Yeah, good people, good people. Well, this case that we're going to talk about today, what stands out about it that is different than maybe some of them that we've talked about on the show before?
Well, it's actually a cold case that got solved.
Amen.
It happened in 2009, and I wound up making an arrest in October of 2020.
Cool. This is good because I think the show you did with this on cold cases was super educational for people.
Good.
There's so much misinformation in the world right now about what the police can do and why they end up being parked like that and
Right.
whatever. And I think that you cleared up a lot of the
good.
mythology that's out there. So this will be your whole thing in cold case in practice. I'm excited about it.
Good.
And to have it go so long without being solved, I'm sure that was a huge relief for the family to finally have some knowledge of who
It
killed
was,
their loved
but
one.
they were cautious. I opened it up again for maybe 2 months and did some work on it and saw that, okay, I think it's got some legs. I think we can do this. And only at that point did I contact Mr. Sowers' daughter, Sharon, and tracked her down in Richmond and had a talk with her in her house. And she was happy, but she was also, please don't do this unless you truly think you can solve it. She's like, I don't want old wounds being torn open for it to go unsolved again. She's like, I already did that 10 years ago. So promise me. And I had to stop her. I was like, I never promise I'm going to be able to solve a crime. I will promise I will give you my all, and I will be transparent. I'll stay in constant communication with you. There will be things that I cannot tell you about the investigation, but I will tell you everything that I can.
I think that's so important to be straight up about that.
You have to.
I know of a case right now that's unsolved, and the victim's family, and I don't have any reason to doubt them, but according to the family, a detective somewhere told them one day that I'll have an arrest in 6 months. And we're well past that.
Yeah.
And the idea being is stick with the idea that we're going to work hard at it, because I think taking somebody on that roller coaster ride would just be awful.
Yeah, it's not fair to them.
What a neat thing to talk about then.
Yeah.
Well,
well, tell us, so you actually were primary, I guess, on this when this happened on May 27th of 2009. Did this initially become yours, or was it
was
the cold
originally
case?
David Richardson and Chris Schoonover worked it. I remember going out to the scene that night simply to help with a neighborhood canvass, because at first Mr. Sowers got found because he owns a restaurant and a bar up Bryan Station Road in I believe it's the High Crest Shopping Plaza. I think it was called Thoroughbreds at the time. His employees got worried that he didn't come into work that evening. So they went to the house, the door was unlocked, so they went in and they found him at the bottom of the stairs at the basement. They called 911. ER shows up, takes him to the hospital, and it appeared at the scene it's like an elderly man fell down the stairs and hit his head. So we get called initially, and a patrol unit responds. They call out a detective. We're not thinking much of it. And while they were at the scene, the detective, I believe, gets a call from one of the officers at UK, says the doctor says that there's multiple strikes to the head, so this isn't going to be from a single fall. And at that point, several detectives from the homicide unit responded. I believe it was Dave Richardson, because he was next up on the homicide rotation. Chris Schoonover was going to be his secondary. And then I think Bill Brislin, Steve McCown, and I showed up to assist with just a neighborhood canvass.
Gotcha. What do we know about Charlie Sowers then?
Quite the character. Mm-hmm. Everybody we talked to, like I say, he owned a couple of different businesses. And I think this is what probably got him in trouble. He didn't use credit, or he had a big wad of cash on him all the time. Liked to show it, he'd pay beer vendors, employees in cash, so everybody would see what, that he had a stack of money. But again, kind of a rough and tumble guy, kept his bar in check. He didn't have a bouncer. He just kind of did it himself. But really had a reputation as just a big, lovable guy that liked his businesses. He liked the horses and, sports, but just really enjoyed being at his bar, and didn't find many people that had anything bad to say about him other than, he'd flash that cash, and they were always afraid, especially in the business, that someone would come in, and try to rob him.
It wouldn't be the first time.
Correct.
Wouldn't be the first time. Sounds like a nice
guy.
So
on this night, you didn't end up initially working this whole thing. So no. I guess take us up to when you got involved?
Well, let's go back a little bit. What do you know about what happened? Do you know anything about what they tried back in 2009? Were you close enough to them when they were working on it, just to see if we have any gaps that we can fill?
I had for people out there listening, the homicide unit is actually a fairly small room. We had like 10 detectives at the time. So while you're working on your cases, you're listening to other detectives talk about theirs. Like I say, I just went out there that night to assist with the neighborhood canvass, and I wasn't going to be involved in the case whatsoever. But I was hearing what Dave and Chris were doing, and it was one of those cases where you get a tip pretty soon of who the suspect or suspects might be, and then you start getting a couple more. And so Dave and Chris did their due diligence and was like looking into each suspect as being the individual that may or may not be responsible for the death of Mr. Sowers. So it was really your standard case, just they never got quite enough. And then these weird things happen, like Dave Richardson got promoted.
There we go.
And so that case then goes to Chris. Well, at that point, Chris is still working his cases as his primary. And then Chris got pulled into cold case thereafter, and he was instructed by the department, hey, we'd like you to look into these specific cold cases. So he was following orders, and then Chris retired, and with that, we didn't have the funding anymore for the cold case unit. So really the case just sat there until Albert Johnson said he got approval to open up the cold case unit again, asked if I'd like to run it, and I jumped up with both hands in the air and said, absolutely.
For sure. Yeah, and again, we talked about that when you did cold case, that so much depends on funding. Police departments are not the endless buffets of cash.
Yeah.
And homicide units in particular are limited to begin with. It's always been that way. And unfortunately, things like cold case investigation, you could look at as a luxury item.
Yes,
that if you've got some cash left over, and then there's the time factor. I think what's neat is when you describe that bay or that room, I think most of our listeners would probably give a hind tooth to sit in that room for a day, because it really is the hub of all that activity and just the conversations that go on. Like you said, so many things that even back in the day when I was in the unit, just overhearing one another, and then somebody would interject and say, you mean so-and-so? And it was being together like that was mission critical. So
yes, the way it was set up, I can't tell you how many cases got solved because they were talking about, let's see, Dave and Chris were talking about, we got this suspect, nickname's No-No, and then Steve McCown would jump up and that's Nathan Richardson.
There we go.
It's like, what? How's this? And he's like, no, I've got him on him. Robin's like, but your case is better. Let's put all our efforts on that one, and if we clear that one, we'll more than likely be able to clear mine. So it really was just a team effort, and just so many of those cases got solved just by you hearing something that you'd worked on a case 2 years before that was pertinent to them now. It was crazy how some of those things worked out.
Oh, it was. Or somebody might have an informant that can get somewhere where the other people can't, and they pick up the phone. And it was just neat. I've said before that for me in my career, that was the premier team experience in 28 years. Nothing got close to that after that. And it's truly all the dynamics of what a good team are exist in that unit for a reason. And it's just amazing stuff.
Yeah, and if you're not a good team member, you don't last long.
Oh, Lord, no.
You get run out pretty quick.
Yeah, it's I was talking to Paul Williams. We had Paul on with Billy Richmond.
Oh my gosh, I haven't listened to that one. I bet it was
actually, I think we were in here for
quite the party.
I think we were in here for about 8 hours and got 13 minutes of usable audio.
Right, FCC listening in. It's like no,
but it's funny. Me and Paul got on a phone conversation just a couple weeks ago talking about another case that he's going to come back for because he's so fun to talk about.
Absolutely,
and he was talking about when he was the supervisor up there that when they interviewed people, that they used to add, they'd bring people in, they'd bring their little resumes, how it is when you're interviewing for a position, and they'd throw people off because they'd look at them and say, tell me the funniest joke you've ever heard. And most people would get a deer in the headlight look because they're like,
you're not expecting that for an interview.
No, you're like, can you look at the record management system and blah, blah, blah. Well, let me see your last 5 cases and everything. And they would tell them, don't worry about being offensive or anything in this room. And what they were looking for was those kind of people. Not that you had to be a comedian, but can you relax enough vulnerability, that's what we call that, to be around other people and work with them. And so it was kind of neat that was in an interview question that you didn't see in other places.
We had one, I forget the detective's name. He went on to do really good work in narcotics, but he interviewed for homicide, and Assistant Chief Maynard was a lieutenant at the time. and he's getting ready for his interview or whatever. It's like, Lieutenant Maynard loves a good joke. It's like, before it even starts, you need to tell him, hey, I'd like to start things off with a joke. And he's like, you serious? And everyone's like, oh yeah, God, you'll be heads above everybody else if you do that. And I told him the joke to tell, and I cannot say it now. So we're all kind of out in the bay listening, and Kelly goes in, closes the door, and 45 seconds later, the door opens. Maynard leads his head out and looks at me and is like, that's not fair to do to him.
I can't imagine police doing that to one another.
Yeah, it was a great unit. And again, everybody had a sense of humor. And do you remember Matt Sharp?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
I think Jared Kurtzinger, who again went on to become a legendary detective in his own right in narcotics.
100%.
And but I think we pushed him into interviewing with us. We wanted him so bad. And before he went in, Sharp snuck his phone away and did something on his phone and then put it back on his desk. And so Lieutenant Curlis was like, Jared, come on in. We're ready to start. So Jared goes in the room, and Matt gets us all around Curlis's door, and he calls Jared's number. And they're talking, and all of a sudden you just hear, meow, 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 meow. Changed his ringtone.
I love it.
And, of course, Curlis, with one of the best senses of humor ever, you could just hear him laughing. He's like, Jared, it's not a big deal.
Yeah, exactly. That's the stuff you miss when you retire.
Absolutely.
It was a comedy caravan for the most part when you were up there. And that's how you handled the nasty.
Yeah, absolutely.
You had to laugh about everything you could laugh about because that's how you just put everything away where you could work.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people, like athletes, when they retire, it's like, what do you miss most? And they're like, the locker room.
That's it. Yeah, for sure. And that's pretty much what that is.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And Brad Ingram came up with something when he was a lieutenant over homicide. Somebody came in like a commander and was like, God, this is a rough room. They're really tearing up on each other. This can't be good for morale. He's like, they are verbal sparring.
Yes.
He goes, whether they know it or not, they're preparing to go on the stand to be cross-examined. You have to be able to learn to think on your feet and defend yourself, and if you can't do it here, it's going to be real tough in a courtroom.
Yeah.
So I thought that was an interesting take on it.
Well, when I was in the unit, we had a new sergeant come in, and they watched for a couple of weeks and brought us in the office one at a time, and I think I remember a box of tissue on the desk. And it was almost a come to Jesus of, are you okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm okay. I'm all right. Why? Well, are you okay? Are you really okay?
Yeah.
And they had watched that, and they were like, and finally he said, it's just that everybody's really rough on each other, and it looks like you're treating each other. And I said, that's love.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you haven't seen that before.
Yeah.
But it was from the outside, it's like, this too. You go out and you get called out at 3 a.m. and you haven't been to sleep for 3 days.
Yeah.
And the last one that walks in that bay gets beat up like a circus monkey.
Yeah, you lazy ass.
Oh, exactly. Of course, we always picked on people like Billy Richmond.
Sure.
It was easy.
Yeah, the slow antelope on the Serengeti.
Anybody that, when a 6th grade is the 3 hardest years of your life.
Yes,
that's Billy. So it's like,
Billy will get you, little buddy.
Oh yeah, he will for sure. Well, we've jumped off the track, but I think that's one thing the listeners get interested in is what's it really like.
Yeah.
Compared to the BS that's on TV and the movies and stuff like that. It's a huge team thing. There's no room for ego in that, and these cases would never get laid down if people had an ego involved in that. So getting back to it, I think you brought us up to speed on what the initial work was, which I've
I do want to ask. So this poor family, they went just more than 10 years hoping, waiting, and nothing.
Correct. Dave and Chris worked it really hard for 6 months. And then, there's only so much you can do.
Thank you.
And if Franz Wolf had this problem on his first couple of murders, he's like, Rob, am I missing anything? It's like, buddy, you're not.
Yeah.
It's like, I've been with you every step of the way. He was brand new. I was like, there's not anything you haven't done that I could pick up and say, oh, you haven't tried this. It's like, sometimes you have to put it on the shelf for just a bit and just kind of maybe pull it down in a month and look at it again with fresh eyes. It's like, sometimes, Franz, it just takes the phone to ring. You'll get a call one day, and it will unravel so fast you won't believe it.
That's important, again, for victims' families to know.
Yeah.
Because another one of the things that's out there in the mythology is nobody's working on the case. Now, let's be honest, you could have a detective somewhere that's a lazy sloth.
They exist.
Yeah, they exist. They're outliers. You could have that. But the idea is that at some point they do get to a place for in the moment they're terminated based on the fact that nothing's new.
Yeah.
And that's with everything.
Yeah.
Working on it doesn't mean going back and redoing everything unless there's a reason to redo it or if it's
Right,
going to
because you have other cases.
That's it. Yeah.
And before like a situation like that, if I worked one for 3-4 months and just like, I'm at the end of the road, I would call the unit in and give them a complete rundown of the case, what I've done, and ask if there's anything more to do. And surely there will always be an idea or two, but when you get to that point where you've got 10 experienced investigators go, I can't think of anything right now.
And you're back to the phone ringing.
Yes.
Or somebody coming into headquarters.
Yep.
I mean, how many times has that happened where it just happens?
Yeah.
Where the phone rings or you get a message or you get a phone call to go down and meet somebody at the front counter.
Yeah.
And we've all had that. And all of a sudden they hand you a case, which is a miraculous thing.
Well, that's exactly what happened to Franz on that case. It went unsolved for 8 months, and he got a phone call one day, I think at noon, and he had the guy in custody by 5 o'clock that afternoon. Sometimes it just happens that quick, and all you need, James Curlis always says, like it's tough to rip up a sweater, but if you can find a loose end, all it takes is pulling it, and the whole thing comes apart.
Yeah.
And that's exactly the way it is.
I've talked to Franz at Brad Ingram's retirement party. We're going to try to get Franz on.
He'd be fantastic on it.
He's like a little cherub.
Yeah.
It's like in a church or something. He's just a neat guy.
Great storyteller.
Yeah, big time. Well,
so back to this. Yeah. So in between, I know this murder happened in May of 2009. You made an arrest in October of 2020. So at what point did this start unraveling for you that you thought, I've got something? How did that happen?
Well, really, it was a call from Dave Richardson, the original detective. And he's like, hey, I heard they opened up cold case. He's like, I really think Charlie Sowers is solvable. He's like, do me a favor and pick it up and look at it. Read through it a couple of times, and Dave did great work. Sometimes so at that point, it had been 10 years. So I'm like, let's start re-interviewing some of the people that Dave interviewed because it's been 10 years and we believed suspect, knew victim and all this stuff and several friends. So maybe somebody broke up with their girlfriend and now they're ready to talk, stuff like that. So just really wound up re-interviewing people, and one interview with Tanya Joyner, I talked to her and she's like, talked to Tony McQueen and she said that she was with
Hey, there's more to the story, so go download the next episode like the true crime fan that you are.
The Murder Police podcast is hosted by Wendy and David Lyons and was created to honor the lives of crime victims, so their names are never forgotten. It is produced, recorded, and edited by David Lyons. The Murder Police podcast can be found on your favorite Apple or Android podcast platform, as well as at murderpolicepodcast.com, where you will find show notes, transcripts, information about our presenters, and a link to the official Murder Police Podcast merch store where you can purchase a huge variety of Murder Police Podcast swag. We are also on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, which is closed caption for those that are hearing impaired. Just search for the Murder Police Podcast and you will find us. If you have enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe for more and give us 5 stars and a written review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you download your podcasts. Make sure you set your player to automatically download new episodes so you get the new ones as soon as they drop. And please tell your friends. Lock it down, Judy.